So, can we
Hare
begin?
Krishna Maharaj.
Can we begin with a little kirtan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And what time do we stop?
Maharaj, we have around like 30 minutes for talk and then few minutes for the question and answer.
Very good. But if I do a little kirtan, is that included in the talk or is that as well as?
No, Maharaj, we have in total 1 hour, so you can use it as you please.
Oh, okay. It's not like.
So, Maharaj, while you do the kirtan, should we mute everyone or unmute everyone?
There's a gap between the voices because of the.
Yes.
So probably they can still hear it, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll have devotees here, they'll sing along so I know when to come back in again. Okay, good.
Okay, I'll mute everyone. Hare Krishna.
Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutane Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutane Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Punyavali Pastyatyanisha Tarine
Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Asyate Vishatari
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Jaya
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasudeva Gaura
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Ram
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram
Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada
Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya
Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada ki
Joy.
Jaya Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Ashtata Satashle Bhakti Caru Swami Maharaj ki Jai
Joy.
Jaya Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Ashtata Satashle Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai
Joy.
Nantakota Vaishnavinda ki
Joy.
Naresh Haridas Thakur ki
Joy.
Prem Se Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudhi Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki
Joy.
Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giridham ki
Joy.
Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Shri
Joy.
Mayapur Dham ki
Joy.
Gangamaya ki Jamuna ki Shri Devi Bhakti Devi Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki Lord Chaitanya Harinam Sankirtanam ki Brihat Sangha ki Srila Prabhupada ki Srila Bhakti Caru Maharaj ki
Joy.
Gaura Premanandi glorious to the assembled devotees all glory to Sri Guru and all glory to Srila Prabhupada Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Vishaya Bhakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Sri Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nivasesha Srinivadi Aschachadesha Tarine.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yeah, my name is Krishna Mohan. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Please accept my humble obeisances also.
And welcome to our ISKCON program. And I just introduced to everyone your biography. Maharaj born in United Kingdom. He's by was initiated by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada in 1972. He held various positions in ISKCON and served Srila Prabhupada in various countries, notably the United Kingdom, Africa, Malaysia, Europe, Philippines, and New Zealand.
And Australia.
In Australia. And His Holiness Janananda Maharaj is very exalted devotee, traveling and preaching all over the world. The main driving force behind the World Holy Name Initiative and various other wonderful projects in ISKCON. He is also member of Committee of Kirtan Standard. And his Kirtan, Harinam, and many other transcendental qualities are very much known to all the devotees here. So we thank Maharaj very much for kindly joining us tonight to give us his guidance and direction at this critical time of the departure of His Holiness Bhakti Caru Swami Maharaj. And thank you, Maharaj, and please give us your guidance and inspiration. And it is very important to us. Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Krishna Mohan Prabhu. Thank you, Sumendra Krishna Prabhu, for facilitating it, and Rasikananda Prabhu. My opportunity to associate with dear disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Caru Maharaj on this occasion. Now I'm sure that many other devotees have given their association to you at this time, and I'm sure that we're all binding and bonding together to help each other and to strengthen each other's resolve and Krishna consciousness. So we'll try to speak a few words of something, whatever we can share. Maybe some things a little bit about Bhakti Caru Maharaj, but specifically about our, our mood. Most likely, many others have said similar things. You've read similar things, but we all need to be reminded. We all need to understand, let's say, a little deeper. In one sense, the spiritual master, we all know, never leaves us. He may, sometimes we say, takes on his form in the Kalila Pratishta, but indeed, devotees of the Lord feel that. And we could have sung the song, Ye Nilo Premadani, you've already sung that. I'm sure you meditated upon the deep meanings therein. But the spiritual master, our connection with Krishna through his mercy form, external manifestation form of his mercy, who appears before us to connect us, accept us, attract us, inspire us, save us, whatever, in this world, is always with us. We know that when the spiritual pure devotees come in this world, they themselves, we accept them as the captain of the boat of devotional service, by which we may cross the great ocean of nescience. Just as the sages of Naimishranya accepted Sutta Goswami as the captain of their ship. So all of us, of course, we have our admiral, Srila Prabhupada of the fleet, you could say. But we also have others who are like captains of our particular situations, acting on behalf of the great admiral of the ISKCON movement, the great movement to spread Krishna consciousness. So His Holiness Bhakti Caru Maharaj was certainly one of the most, say, wonderful disciples of Srila Prabhupada, an exemplary example of, for all of us now. He had, as you know, very intimate association with Srila Prabhupada in the last year of Srila Prabhupada's manifested presence in this world. Very intimate service as a servant of Srila Prabhupada. So he has very much incredible absorption. Can we shut the window, do you think? Very loud noise. You have to excuse us for some noises from here and there. We are in New Mayapur in France, where I'm spending the last 4 or 5 months. And the devotees have been quite busy in various projects around the place, tractors and building and so on. So maybe sometimes there might be a little noise there. That's unavoidable. But Bhakti Caru Maharaj has taught us by his living example how to serve the spiritual master, how we can really please. The essence of spiritual life, the secret of spiritual life, is to please the spiritual master. This is the means by which we receive the mercy of Krishna, by pleasing the Lord's representative in this world. Of course, we know Srila Prabhupada is our spiritual siksha. He's the guide to all of us. He's our shelter. But in order for us to, let's say, understand deeply the process of devotional service, we need association. We need the association of devotees to nurture our bhakti creepers, our devotional creepers. And it's a regulated principle, according to Rupa Goswami, that an aspiring devotee accept initiation from a living representative of the Parampara. So, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, many of you are fortunate to get that opportunity to associate with Bhakti Caru Maharaj, such a wonderful example of a Vaishnava, embellished with all good qualities, sadhubhushan, wonderful qualities. Every single person, I've never met anybody who didn't have that experience of becoming, let's say, affected by the wonderful qualities of Bhakti Caru Maharaj. And many of you had quite intimate association with Maharaj. I did and didn't, it depends how you look at it. Of course, many times we were in the same room together, maybe honoring prasadam. As you know, Bhakti Caru Maharaj was very, pretty much a living personification of Chaitanya Leela in many ways, because during Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's manifest presence, one of the primary interactions with the Lord and his devotees was around prasadam. More or less in Puri every day there was a gathering of devotees to honor prasadam with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Bhakti Caru Maharaj was completely naturally, it wasn't like unnatural or motivated thing. It was just a natural part of his character, of his qualities, that he just loved to be with devotees. He loved to share whatever Prabhupada had given him. He loved to share. He saw this in Srila Prabhupada. So many times, whenever in Mayapur, of course, during the Mayapur festival, always Bhakti Caru Maharaj would be inviting his godbrothers and sisters to come and take prasadam with him, sometimes hundreds at the same time. In London also, I remember calling so for prasadam several times. Here in New Mayapur, last year, was it July last year, wasn't it? July last year, Bhakti Caru Maharaj came to New Mayapur in France. And you may or may not be aware, but way back in the 1980s, late 1980s, this project was lost to ISKCON. The government had basically taken it away because of financial considerations. Various things took place in the French Yatra at that time. And Bhakti Caru Maharaj came here and took up the task of somehow or other saving New Mayapur. He would have lost it entirely if he hadn't taken that role on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. That's another story, which I'm sure you're going to read about soon. It is going to be documented. He had a lot of very, very intimate and very deep connections with the French Yatra over 4 or 5 years of being GBC here. He then became GBC of France. And he has disciples here also. Quite fair, not so many, but a fair few. And, the devotees here have a very close, the present devotees here have a very close connection with His Holiness Bhakti Caru Swami, who spent a week here last year, daily giving seminars all day long, as well as, of course, darshan and various other classes and kirtans and what have you. And he and his disciples in Europe have been very instrumental in helping to fix so many areas which are required here in New Mayapur to be repaired around the property. And he gave this inspiration and responsibility to his disciples in Europe to try to help New Mayapur, because he knew how dear this was to Srila Prabhupada. This is how we make advancement. When we know what is dear to the spiritual master, and we do it. This is quite simple, but this is Bhakti Caru Maharaj. He was always focused on what Srila Prabhupada wanted. And amongst those, let's say, obvious desires of Srila Prabhupada, we could say, but we don't always follow it, of working cooperatively together, of encouraging all devotees, no matter what our issues may be or where we've gone, to somehow come together. As Prabhupada said, we should put the Acharya in the center. We may have our own independence, grihastas naturally have. Temples may also have. Prabhupada generally wanted the temples to be autonomous. Of course, we're here to help each other. But he wanted the unifying factor with the Acharya in the center, which means, basically speaking, always trying to live our lives in a way that he would be pleased. Now that Bhakti Caru Maharaj, Prabhupada has taken him away for some other service, he's still fully engaged, as always, in massaging Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet and serving his will. Prabhupada obviously has some other special service for him. Maybe there was a little time span there maybe he wanted to stay here to finish projects, but obviously that is now your golden opportunity to continue that legacy and to develop whatever mood, whatever services, whatever instructions Maharaj has given us, at least for those who are immediate disciples, others with the mood, the spirit, the mood of cooperation, the mood of loving relationships and loving exchanges and compassion for all living entities, etc. And so on. You could go on with its qualities, all 26 qualities are no doubt manifest there in the form of Bhakti Caru Maharaj, and they're still there. As we said in the beginning, the spiritual master comes as the captain of the boat, and when he leaves, he doesn't leave as such. The boat is still there. His instructions are still there. Can we turn this off? Whatever it is. Is this necessary? He's still there, and the spiritual master lives forever, and his instructions is probably well-known statement there. And Vaishnava, he reasons ill who tell that Vaishnavas die while thou art living still in sound. The Vaishnavas die to live, and live and try to spread the holy life around. This is a very appropriate statement of Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which is very applicable to all great Vaishnavas, all great devotees. And their instructions are still there. And today I'd like to read a little bit from Srimad Bhagavatam, and a little bit of a few letters of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, we'll start. This is from the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. If you have your Bhagavatam, you can read. Follow a little bit. This is in regards to the incident of Paranjan. And Paranjan, of course, took birth as a woman in his next lifetime, Vaidarbhi, and she was married to King Malayadvaj, who was a great devotee of the Lord. And when King Malayadvaj passed away, They were basically vanaprasth in the forest for Vaidarbhi or for Madhava. She was overwhelmed, as we do when our dear friends, our family members, and most of all, when our spiritual life and soul, who has inspired us to embrace the path of pure devotional service, is no longer there in their Bapu presence. One naturally laments, one naturally feels devastated at heart. Before I do that, I'll just read a verse from the third chapter. This is a very interesting verse. This is spoken by Uddhava. Uddhava was with Krishna. When Krishna left this planet, Uddhava had that experience. But he said, my dear Vidura, he's just meeting with Vidura, the sun of the world, Lord Krishna, has set, and our house has now been swallowed by the great snake of time. What can I say to you about our welfare? This may be the mood of a disciple and a devotee, not only disciples, everyone who knew Bhakti Caru Maharaj. You all know by the response after his departure, how the whole of ISKCON, and not just ISKCON, the Gaudiya Math, many other Vaishnavas from different places who had his association, how much they appreciated and how much they felt a great loss to the world when he departed. And Prabhupada says in the purport to that verse we just read, it's like the night, the sun is set, as Buddha said. And at night, Prabhupada was saying, all kinds of snakes and dangerous things. This is a risk, you could say, but it doesn't have to be. If a person is very weak and dependent upon the Bapu entirely, and has not really understood the principle of associating with a spiritual master. It is understood that in order to really serve the Vapu of the spiritual master, one has to embrace the Vani. We can look at Srila Prabhupada's example and see with Srila Prabhupada himself how he didn't have so much Vapu association or direct physical association with his spiritual master, but he embraced the instructions of his spiritual master, stating that they were his life and his very soul. He made those instructions one with his heart, and this was his success. And this should be our meditation. So let's see what is said here in the fourth canto of Bhagavatam. This is text number 47.
What chapter is it?
Excuse me?
Chapter number, please.
Chapter 28, sorry. Canto 4, chapter 28, text number 47. It's a famous section, but the disciples and all of us should meditate on this. It should be our, you could say we accept this as our Prabhupada Desh. This is our real service to the spiritual master, whether we're in Australia, New Zealand, Germany, England, France, America, India, wherever we are. This is all temporary, but our real Prabhupada Desh is eternal. And it's founded really on Guru Nishta, faith in the spiritual master, which is faith in Krishna, the system given by Krishna, evam parampara praptam, imam rajasharu viduhu. Complete faith in the words of Krishna that we learn, we receive this transcendental message and the mercy which goes along with those who embrace that message through the line of parampara. It is not just by our own figment of our imagination. It is a reality. It comes down there. And you could say that real mercy, not the mercy which gives us material relief or whatever, but the real mercy of awakening within our hearts, our attachment or our love for Krishna comes through the more we embrace the order or the direction, the spiritual direction of the pure devotees of the Lord. So let's see. Being now alone and a widow in the forest, the daughter, oh, very good, thank you, someone's put it on the screen. The daughter of Vidarbha began to lament, incessantly shedding tears which soaked her breasts and crying very loudly. This is not an unusual emotion, physically or even those on the spiritual path. Prabhupada writes, figuratively, the queen is supposed to be the disciple of the king. Thus, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, his disciples should cry, exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves his body. However, the disciple and the spiritual master are never separated because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called the association of Vani. Physical presence is called Vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. This is basically the, what we can say, it's like a Mahavakya. In regards to this particular situation which we find ourselves in, is a Mahavakya. And this is the life and soul of the disciple. And this way the disciples will always feel the presence of their spiritual master, maybe more than when he was physically present. It can be like that. Prabhupada said he never forgot his spiritual master for a moment. He felt him with him always present with him. And the same applies. It may be in the mood of Vipalamba or separation, you could say, but that is an even more intense relationship than that of Sambhog or meeting with the Lord, meeting with the spiritual master. Meeting with the Lord is one and the same. It's like, you could say different, but in one sense it's not. Same principle is there. And in this way, they often say absence makes the heart grow fonder. Because there is no absence in one sense. To think that the spiritual master is gone is not correct. Spiritual master, as long as we are remembering and trying to abide by his will, thinking how I can please my spiritual master, how he would like me to act now. Yes, it's understandable. We may feel lamentation, we may feel heartbroken. It's quite understandable. But we should always refocus and think, wait, now let me see. I've taken shelter of my spiritual master. Now my business is always to try to please his will. So now, how can I behave? How can I live to please him? How would he like me to be? He is here right now. So how he would like me to, interact, act, behave, think, etc., chant, how he would like me to do that. This is how we can always keep the spiritual master firmly in our heart. It's like Prabhupada himself said one time, you may be in Gold Coast. He didn't say Gold Coast. Listen. You may be in the Gold Coast. You may be in Auckland. You may be in Sydney or Brisbane or Melbourne or wherever you are. And somebody else may be in New York, or maybe in London, Paris, Germany, India. Wherever you are, he said, you were chanting Hare Krishna. I am chanting Hare Krishna. Therefore, we are all packed up together with the instruction of the spiritual master binding us. This is cooperation, working cooperatively together after the spiritual master leaves to see that his will is fulfilled. Just like Krishna left his will in the form of Bhagavad Gita, we, as spiritual masters, also left their will, which is non-different than Prabhupada's will, you could say, to try to fulfill the intentions of Srila Prabhupada, the various objectives which Srila Prabhupada clarified in his writings, etc. to embrace those instructions as our life and soul. I'll just carry on with the next verse a little bit more. The purport. Go on and on. Whenever an acharya comes, following the superior orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his representative, he establishes the principles of religion. As enunciated in Bhagavad Gita, religion means abiding by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Religious principles begin from the time one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the acharya's duty to spread a bona fide religious system and induce everyone to bow down before the Supreme Lord. Let me say, the Supreme religion, specifically, Vaipung Sangparo Dhamma Vito Bhakti His devotional service. Lord Chaitanya and his followers have given that in its complete, perfect package in the form of the Sankirtan movement. And Bhakti Caru Maharaj was a living example, walking example of Sankirtan, complete absorption of his mind, body, words, and everything about him in glorifying Kirtan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even he was endowed and blessed with a very great musical talent, poetic talent, literary talents, and everything else that goes without the false ego that most of us carry when we have any so-called talent in this world, and devoid of the false ego, and just for the sake of pleasing spiritual master and inspiring others. I'll read one more. We could read all day, but I'll just read one more purport, and I think we'll have to read one, two other things and finish from there. Continuing in the purport, this is text number 50 now, at the end of the purport. Similarly, a devoted disciple of the spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down upon this earth to re-establish the principles of religion, so his representative, the spiritual master, also comes to re-establish religious principles. It is the duty of the disciples to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master and execute it properly. So that is our real business. Otherwise, the disciples should decide to die along with the spiritual master. We shouldn't take that literally in terms of physically thinking, I cannot do that, therefore, no. In other words, we should really do whatever we can to follow or to execute the mission of the spiritual master. If we're falling short of the mark, of course, we should try to pick ourselves up. It means we're, in one sense, we're already, say, not dead as such, but like dormant or something. If we want life, if we want to feel the spiritual master's presence, embrace his mission. And lamentation will go away, enthusiasm, confidence, and satisfaction will come in, because he'll be very pleased. He's still present and still blessing the disciples, everyone, but especially those who are embracing his instructions and trying their level best to fulfill his mission. And Bhakti Caru Maharaj has given us all many instructions, whether it's details like the fineries of cooking, how to serve prasadam, how to deal with devotees, how to present the philosophy in a relevant, palatable way, and you go on and on. In examples of his showing acharya, one who teaches by example. Like that. In other words, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared. So this is a practical meaning. Prepared to lay down his life and abandon all personal considerations. This is surrender, give up all forms of religiosity. Or let's say social considerations may also be included, but any other motivation, basically. Give up all of the motivations and surrender to me. And this is what Srila Prabhupada has given us, this golden opportunity. I'm just going to read one or two things from Prabhupada's letter, then we'll finish and maybe questions will be there. Prabhupada, even when Prabhupada was present, most of us, many of his disciples never saw him. Thousands of disciples never even saw Prabhupada. They got initiated in male. And Srila Prabhupada in the last few years, he didn't visit the West hardly. At least he only visited some places in the West. So many devotees were feeling that way. And then other devotees who had intimate association with Prabhupada at some point of time. And Prabhupada, in the beginning, for instance, he was in New York. The devotees thought he'd never leave New York. And then all of a sudden he went to San Francisco, then he went to Montreal, and here and there, back to India, different things. So devotees were feeling lost. There was no big society. There was no protection from senior devotees. They were young children, and the father suddenly is left. We were very fortunate. We're very fortunate in ISKCON. There are tens of thousands of devotees, senior devotees around, who give all support, all encouragement. They may have had a similar experience to what you've been through recently. So they have, not just, say, shastric statements or, consoling words, but they have practical realization of the experience. So it's something very deep and something which can be very enhancing, you could say, our progress in spiritual life. So there's one or two levels. I understand you are feeling my absence, Prabhupada says. Krishna will give you strength. Physical presence is immaterial. Presence of the transcendental sound received from the spiritual master should be the guidance of life. That will make our spiritual life successful. If you feel very strongly about my absence, you may place my picture on my sitting place, and this will be a source of inspiration for you. That was an early letter in 1967 to the devotees in New York. Same year, Prabhupada was in India. He had gotten sick with a heart problem and went to India. Your eagerness to get me back in the States will surely be a success, because I'm also eager to return. Tears for Krishna is as good as associating with him personally. In the spiritual world, separation is more valuable than meeting. So your feelings and tears of Krishna consciousness will make you more enriched in spiritual advancement. And that was to Janaki, Mukunda Maharaj's ex-wife. And here's a nice letter. It's to devotees in general. It's not to anyone specific. Never think that I am absent from you. Physical presence is not essential. Presence by message or hearing is real touch. Lord Krishna is present by his message, which was delivered 5,000 years ago. We feel always the presence of our past acharyas simply by their immutable instructions. They're never indestructible instructions. I hope you will understand me right and do the needful. Here's another letter to another disciple, Bhakti Jam. You do not require to worry, as I shall never leave you. You are my disciple, and I am your spiritual master. So there is no question, as long as you follow my instructions, that I shall ever leave you. Just remember, under all circumstances, to chant 16 rounds of japa daily, offer your prasadam to Krishna, and do all of the things which you already know. As you are a senior disciple, these things will protect you under all conditions, without any doubt. To Brahmananda. So there is no cause of becoming sad. Our meeting and separation in the material world is like the flowing tide of the river. During the flowing tide of the river, so many different floating articles meet together, and with the flowing, they again become separated by the movement of the waves. That is the way of the material life. But our separation, although it resembles exactly in the material way, it is completely different. In the spiritual world, separation is more relishable than meeting. In other words, in spiritual life, there is no separation. Separation is eternal, and meeting is also eternal. The separation is simply another feature of meeting. We try to meditate on that a little bit. That it's another form of meeting. We're meeting the spiritual master. We're going to go deeper and deeper in your spiritual lives to feel more and more the presence of Bhakti Trinity. He's going to empower you more and more and more to take more and more shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. And his mercy is will be even more accessible. And many, many thousands and thousands of devotees in the world, as you may be lamenting losing his association, many devotees are lamenting we never took advantage of his association when he was present. Maybe never even interacted. Maybe we didn't really take it so seriously. But such rare association, Akshno Palam Tradishankata Sangam, to get that opportunity to glorify such pure devotees with the tongue, to have the opportunity to associate them with the physical form, to see them with their eyes, is such a great fortune. Such great souls are extremely rare in this world. And now this is a purifying thing where we wish I should have done better. I could have served more nicely or more pleasingly. I could have, we may think like this. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I take that advantage when I was there to go and see him? Whatever it is. But this is itself is developing this correct urge, this greed, this need to get good association, the best association. We have to develop this understanding of the importance of association. And it's not just physical, but it's the instructions of the spiritual master. Now we can associate with those instructions, even more merciful, because in his presence you may not always be able to get there. You may not always understand, but his instructions are there, and they're always there. And we can take advantage any time. It's not like, too busy. No, the spiritual master's presence is always there in the form of his instruction, his example, his inspiration, and his we may not see it, but his spiritual mercy upon us is always there. We may not be able to see them, but it's always there. And he's always blessing his disciples. So take advantage. There are so many levels. I'll leave it at that. Because now it's 17 minutes left. So if anyone would like to ask any questions or make any comments, I haven't had, as I said, I didn't have too much direct association. I even remember one time on a plane, we were flying from London to Delhi. And even on the plane, Maharaj had us all, like 4 or 5 of us were flying to Delhi. I think Prabhupada Swami was there, 2 other Swamis. I was just a brahmachari, I guess, at that time. And I was on the flight also. He also arranged prasadam. We all sat around having a feast on the plane. It seems like prasadam was one of his, pet loves. And not necessarily for his own pleasure, but seeing the pleasure of devotees honoring prasadam, seeing the pleasure of devotees associating with each other, with Krishna in the center, with the Acharya in the center. So any questions? My humble is also Viraduti Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna to Neelam. Please turn on your camera. Oh, I think that's just a general thing. Okay, that's just some initial thing. If anyone has any questions, you can ask them through Samendra Krishna, somebody,
Yes.
or you can write them on the chat message.
Yes, Maharaj, there is a question from Neelam Mataji. So I'll just read that out to you. So the question is, with COVID, virtual learning or working or Sankirtan has become the norm, but still students feel absence of face-to-face teachings or meeting by staff or seeing the guru. Would you agree, Maharaj, that face-to-face is more emphatic and leaves a higher impression?
The feelings, my understanding is the feelings that you're going through now, in regards to Neelam's point, are that there's relevance there for sure. Having that direct association, so to speak, is very special. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. However, because of reasons beyond your control, it's not because you don't want to have that association. It's not because we don't appreciate it. when we do appreciate it, when we want that association, but for circumstances beyond our control, we become more eligible to actually associate properly. Sometimes we associate, you could say, in physical presence, but we're not really having a deep understanding of what that means. Sometimes it's a little bit mixed with materialistic perspectives or selfish perspectives, or something, not taking such deep advantage of that association. So it's also good, but it's not so deep as it could be. So when that separation is there, and circumstances beyond our control, you may say, with this present epidemic, if one is actually sincere about that, then what will happen is in your heart, all kinds of deepening realizations will take place, which help you to really appreciate more the direct association. I remember one time when I was in Uganda back in 1970, something 1980, I can't remember, something like that. And I'd left the temple in Nairobi with this sentimental idea of going to Uganda and trying to preach. I ended up being locked up in a prison with no contact with anyone in the world. And nobody knew where I was. And boy, did that help me to appreciate the association of devotees, even devotees who I didn't really want to associate with. It became like I was hankering to be with them again. Even though I didn't really want to be with them normally, I started to hanker for that association, realizing how precious that association is. Sometimes familiarity comes in, and Krishna sometimes arranges things so it deepens our appreciation and our eligibility also, our hankering to have that real association. So as far as I'm concerned, Krishna's hand is working here to help us to really develop the eligibility, the adhikar, to really understand what it means to associate with devotees. And then Krishna will arrange it when that desire is of sufficient character or quality, then it will be a much, much deeper, stronger understanding of the association, not without the mixture sometimes of over-socialism or over-mundane, etc., or discrimination, or whatever it is, but with Christians, essentially. Realizing how weak we are, how much we need association, how much we, and so on. I think it can be seen as a positive preparation, kind of curative preparation to help us to become more hankering for that. Of course, we take as much advantage as we can, and Krishna sees that too, making the best use of a bad bargain, Prabhupada would sometimes say. So we do take it, but it's not a bad bargain either. It's a very good bargain that we can hear classes of devotees all over the world, that we can associate through many different types of modern technology in ways that we may not have done before. So in that sense, it's very fortunate. I don't know how far it is in different places where you cannot physically associate it. It's not like that in France, where it's pretty open in France, in general, amongst the public. So we have certain restrictions, obviously, but in general, we have fairly open association with devotees, maybe different in different places. Can't comment. But whatever it is, Krishna's hand is working. We should take advantage of this to let's say, become more serious in our practice of devotional service. Anything else? Oh, there's something on the screen, is that correct?
Yes, Maharaj. There is, Maharaj, there is a question on the chat box.
Okay, can I read it?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much for touching the class. I'll just touch it a minute. Here we go. Touching times. Well, they're very touching times. They are indeed. And I know many of the devotees are having very deep realizations of various kinds, affecting many people in different ways, but that's what's required. Could you please advise the pastime of our Guru Maharaj, how he got New Mayapur temple back? It would be very inspiring to listen to this glorification from a pure devotee, not like me. I can pass you over to a pure devotee and he can explain it. You will mean your servant Shyamsundar Krishna Das. Haribol Shyamsundar Prabhu, Shyamsundar Krishna Das Prabhu, and and Shamadalari are my very dear friends who live in Melbourne. And I stayed in their house dozens and dozens of times in Delhi, and they've always been so kind to me, and very fortunate. I had their association through them. I was able to go more back because they're very dear disciples of Bhakti Trinaj, like all of you who are coming from that side. Well, how we got New Mayapur back? Well, I might. Would you like to tell? You probably have memorized it by now, haven't you? Well, I'm going to ask Lochananda Prabhu is here, who's known to many of you. He was one of your Gold Coast stars for a few years there, and cooking up a storm in the restaurants there. And now he's cooking up a storm here in New Mayapur in a different way. Also in the kitchen sometimes, but in other areas too. So Bhakti Trinaj did tell the story when he was here in the temple a year or so ago with his many disciples. About 100 disciples came with him when he came here for a week. Amongst them, some one or two passed away since then, haven't they? Rameshwar passed away. Maybe one other passed away who came in. I don't know. I think so.
One more disciple in the manor.
Yeah, those from the manor. They had a very severe challenge there, and still do. So, I mean, I can't. I mean, you really find. I was speaking to the devotee named Madhavendra Puri a few days ago, and he's working on putting a whole compilation together on this, a book, which will explain much about Maharaj's service here in France, which is, you know, one of the many significant, so many significant services he rendered. So again, I can't remember all the details, but I'll try to account something. I didn't bring a piece of paper. Actually, funny enough, I did write something on a bit of paper, but I didn't bring it. So anyway, it's around about 1988, he visited France. And at that time, you know, it was like the French yatra had been more or less been put into a very devastating condition. The senior devotees had left, the initiating guru had left. There's so many unpaid bills and tax issues and so many things. I don't know them all, but so many issues were there. And the government and certain members of the community in France more or less were on the warpath to try to more or less stop ISKCON in France. So he came at an extremely troubled time. Very few devotees were in the temple at that time. We're still living in New Mayapur, although it was going on auction very shortly. But the devotees were still living there as and until it was sold to an appropriate buyer. So obviously the auction was in a local town, and obviously the Hare Krishnas couldn't bid for their own property. You can't, you know, when you're put into such a situation, you can't bid to get your own property back. It doesn't work like that. So there was an auction, and so quickly, when Maharaj heard what's going on, he quickly kind of started to wonder, what are we going to do? We've got to save New Mayapur somehow or another. And he was trying this, that, and the other, contacting different people. Nothing much was coming. How to help? And then one devotee, one of his disciples, I guess he was a disciple then, I don't know if he wasn't a disciple then, was he? But one man who was previously been a businessman, something like that, was becoming a devotee or whatever here in France, and he just retired, and he came forward. And this particular man later on became disciple, and we took sannyas. Maharaja Swami from Maharaj, he passed away a few years ago. But he then put forward a plan that, you know, we formed some kind of company, and then he said that we can maybe we can attend the auction using this company and so on and so forth. I don't know what it was called, something or another. And I know what it's called. But he came forward, and together they started working how to raise them. I think he put forward a lot of money, didn't he? Parajakichar, a few $100,000.
He sold his house.
He sold his house, and a few $100,000. Well, now we have euros. In those days, it was francs. lot of money he put forward, but it still was nowhere near enough. I mean, we had to, there was a minimum sale price, and you couldn't offer anything less than that. And then Bhakti Chumaj was appealing to London. He was going anywhere to appeal, and he went there himself, and he tried to talk to the patrons, right?
Yeah.
And the patrons, the head of the patrons, and Ramesh, he wasn't initiated, and he was a Jain. He was Jain. Huh?
Ramesh Shah.
Ramesh?
Ramesh Shah, his name was
Ramesh Shah. Yeah, Ramesh Shah. He was a Jain, and Jains were very thrifty with money, as anyone knows. If ever you had any friends, association with persons from Jain background, at least those who were successful. He was very successful man in financial terms. And so he was the head of the patrons. It was like, wow, it was so difficult to. What was the final thing that he agreed? How did he agree?
He said he will put his house in the bank and he'll give the money, and the temple has to pay it back without interest in 1 year.
Eventually, but I mean, there was something in between, I think, that because he wasn't in the event, he somehow or another, and Bhakti Chumaj never thought he was going to agree, but he agreed. And apparently he put his own house under the bank mortgage or whatever, and on the promise that Bhakti Chumaj would arrange for it to be paid back within a year. Quite a short time span, to say the least. It was hundreds of thousands of pounds, I believe. And a lot of money anyway, whatever. So somehow or another, they managed to rustle up the bare minimum which would be required to enter into this auction. So they went off, Bhakti Chumaj dressed up in his suit and looked like a very, let's say, sophisticated Indian gentleman. And he went off to the auction with this other devotee, this other man from France, whose company was basically formed this company to make the offer. And they're there, and there was only one other contestant, right, at the auction.
Yeah.
Only one other group turned up. And anyway, all sorts of different things happened. I can't remember all the details, but the bidding started, and they went over the what they had. And it started to go up, and they were looking to say, the lawyers were wondering, do you actually have assets to make such a bid? And this devotee later became Maharaja. I said, don't worry, that gentleman over there is a very rich Indian businessman. He's going to back us up, don't worry. That was Bhakti Chumaj. And he's keeping quiet. It's all in French. So the thing is going on, and the biddings are going on. There was something happened in New Mayapur. I can't remember the detail, wasn't it? The devotees in New Mayapur did something or other, and it was threatened. Something took place. I can't remember. You have to read the book when it comes out. But basically speaking, the biddings were going up, and Parivajacharya was looking at Maharaj, looking, Lord, can we bid any higher? And then he made a bid, another bid. It so happened when he made that bid, the other bidder had stepped outside the room, and they have a system in France. They have this kind of this time thing with sand, it goes down through, was it sand?
Lamp, I think.
A lamp, yeah, they have a lamp system here, yeah. They have a lamp inside a kind of a glass bottle. And when the lamp goes out, that's the end of the bidding. And it just so happened when the other guy, who was willing, he went out actually to ask his financier if he wants to go any higher. That's why he went out. But by the time the financier said yes, we'll go. But by the time he came back, just as he was out, the lamp went out. Bang! The hammer went on the table. Sold. So then they said, well, what are we going to do now? They didn't have the money. They had to go on a mad effort all over the place trying to raise the sufficient funds and then pay it back within the next year. He just put so much energy in here into the French yatra to try to encourage the disciples. And it so happened that man in London, Jain, because he was so impressed by Bhakti Chumaj, his honesty, his humility, his determination, his devotion, etc., etc. And they actually managed to pay it back before the year came up. Maharaj had by then got a few disciples here in France, here and there in Europe, and they worked like nobody worked to raise that money and pay it back. So he also became a disciple of Rameshnaya, became a disciple also, and became one of the most prominent disciples in the British Yatra. and financing so many projects around the world, including recently helping New Mayapur considerably financially. He passed away, unfortunately, with COVID-19 also, a few months before Maharaj passed away. But he service carries on. The same thing, the instruction was given to his disciples by Bhakti Caru Maharaj to carry on, as Rameshwar was doing, to carry on with that endeavor. But there's a lot more to that story, but I wasn't here, and I can only remember what comes to mind.
Trying to find the class Maharaj gave.
Yeah, and maybe Lochananda can put that online, and you can hear the whole class. It's quite something. It's quite captivating. We can't obviously put it on now, but he can share it with you, and through Lochan, also through Rasikananda, who was also there at the class too. It's really worth listening to, honestly. It's just so much fun being around Bhakti Caru Maharaj. Everything becomes serious, but it's so pleasing, at the same time. Whatever, his kirtan, his talks, even if he's giving you a kind of a chastisement, it has always got a kind of a loving undercurrent there. It feels sweet. He's like a big laddu, big sweet. It was next. Thank you. Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to do right now, Sham Sundar. And definitely, Lochananda quite well. He'll send it to you, and anyone who wants to hear it, we can share it with you. No problem. And here comes Gaudamandala Prabhu. Gaudamandala Prabhu was our temple president here for many, many years, and another one who gave his life, practically speaking, to keep his ISKCON flag flying strongly here in New Mayapur. Okay, that looks like it, and it is 12 o'clock. I don't know what time it is over there. It's 1 hour is up. And anything else, Samendra?
So thank you very much, Maharaj, for this wonderful class and the time, and it has really helped us with all the instruction that you gave, and also the pastimes.
Prabhupada giving anything, Prabhupada's just reminding us of the deeper aspect of separation. You could go into very deep levels, but this is just air level. Prabhupada's giving how we should feel at air level.
So Maharaj, so probably we can end the class with a short kirtan. Is it okay?
That would be nice. 1 hour is long enough?
We actually keep this session for 2 hours, Maharaj. So we have 1 more hour.
You've had 2 hours now, haven't you?
Yes.
I heard the kirtan and chanting japa before. So. Anyway, it's not the end of the world if you go a little longer. I'm sure you can make up for those lost minutes of sleep. The ones in New Zealand is a bit more difficult if there are any, because over in New Zealand, I suppose it's pretty late now. Must be about 11 o'clock, is it?
Yes, Maharaj.
12 o'clock maybe. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Harinam Sankirtanam ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Bhakti Caru Swami ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Bhakti Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
I'll finish with one little tiny note. Sometimes after we lose the association of a great personality, we start to talk about them, we start to remember them a lot, we start to praise them a lot, etc. Now, of course, for disciples, is there throughout their whole life. But in general, we're talking here. We should try to, see the good qualities in other devotees. We should try to take proper advantage of association amongst devotees in their living presence, so to speak. Not just after they leave do we see all of their wonderful qualities and start to lament this, that, the other about so many things, which is good and that's perfect. But we should also, in their physical presence, learn and develop and cultivate proper association, appreciation of devotees, and so on and so forth like that. Not that we have to wait till the last moment. Preparation. Krishna is preparing us through these various instances so that we do become a little bit more serious in our spiritual lives and a bit more, we could say, grateful for the opportunity which we have by the grace of Srila Prabhupada to associate with wonderful devotees. So take advantage of it while we can, and when we can have it, it should just increase our desire for it and our appreciation for that association, our gratefulness for whatever chance we had or will have in the future. We'll try to remain in that mood of gratefulness, that mood of respect, that mood of service, that mood of indebtedness, so on and so forth. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much.
I don't know when we'll be in Australia or New Zealand or wherever you are. Probably not this year. It doesn't look like. But as Prabhupada said, we're all chanting Hare Krishna. We're all packed up. We're all in the same boat. And Prabhupada is ultimately the guide of the fleet. We may have our own little kind of uniquenesses, but he's the admiral of the fleet. So whatever individualities are, we take shelter. The admiral will guide it all back to back to Godhead. Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Jai. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Krishna Maharaj, everybody else. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Janananda Swami Goswami Maharaj ki jai.
Maharaj, His Holiness the Bhakti Caru Maharaj ki jai. What you can do ever did in serving your Guru right now, and even more in your heart, then make him even more pleased, even more taking up his legacy and even more enthusiastically pushing forward this Krishna conscious movement wherever you are. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Haribol.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.